The dramatic shift in UK migration policy could turn the flood of illegal migrants here in Ireland into a tsunami. But still recovering from the scale of the spoil the vote rebuke, the Minister for Justice, Jim O'Callaghan, has been on the pitch throwing shapes. I'm Eddie Hobbs. Let's break it down. Here with me is TD for Cork North Central and Chairman of Independent Ireland, Ken O'Flynn, already a hot and informed contributor to Dáil debates and one to watch. You're very welcome, Ken. But first, let's listen to Jim O'Callaghan setting the mood with his UK counterparties at Farmley House in the Phoenix Park last week.
Changes to the UK asylum laws can have an impact in Ireland and have had an impact in the past. But that's not to say that the UK can't change their asylum laws. They're perfectly entitled to change their asylum laws. And I thank them again for giving us a heads up in respect of it. However, what it does indicate is that I suppose we need to be nimble in Ireland, as we may need to change our laws and our provisions as well to respond to any changes that have taken place in the UK.
Now, Ken, even before the general election and your elevation into the Dáil TD, this is a topic that you've been very hot on. So, and you've been on the case again very recently. So, what do you see here? What's the risk?
Well, I don't know if I've been hot on the topic. I think I've been interested in the topic because it's what people are saying to me, Eddie. Full stop. You're elected to do a job and to represent people and represent people's views. So that's why I'm hot on the topic, or should have knowledge of the topic. Look, I think the first thing I'll say to you is that Ireland's laws, and we've been talking about it for 12 months since the inception of the party, since Independent Ireland came around. We were saying that we had to get tough on our asylum laws. We had to process quickly, and we had to be respectful to everybody and be fair to everybody. I don't think anyone languishing inside an iPass centre for 11 years is fair on those people either. The only people that make money out of that are solicitors. Let's be honest about it. I think what we have been saying is the Danish model was the model to go with. We're now seeing kind of a copy and paste version being introduced in the UK, which has a serious knock-on effect for Ireland. So, as I've said in the past, Ireland can't be a dumping ground for the UK. You're looking at 80% of asylum seekers in the United Kingdom entering Belfast. That has a serious effect on the 400 kilometres of border between Northern Ireland and the Republic of Ireland. Okay? So, like when the minister says we need to be nimble and we need to be quick, he's 100% correct. Actually, we're lagging way behind on this. They were warned about this. They were warned this was going to come. We saw the changes that were being made slightly here and there. Comments that have been made in the last 6 months, in particular in British politics, it changed a lot. Even Labour has shifted its views on things, or started talking about its new views.
Why do you think that is? What's driving
UK
that?
Labour, by the way.
Yeah,
no, not Irish Labour.
But what's
by any
driving
means.
that, you think, in the UK? The shift from Labour, is it the growth of reform?
I think that certainly has something to do with it. Of course it does. But look, reform, a bit like Independent Ireland, we're listening to people on the ground. We're not afraid to say it. Because look, when I go out into Lidl or on a Thursday night when I'm back in Cork and down in Mallow, or if I'm at the church in Ballyvalan or wherever, and people are saying to me, Ken, there's something seriously wrong here, and nobody's talking about it. And when you're asked the question, and bear in mind, 6 months ago, I asked the Taoiseach, or the Taoiseach at the time, a very valid question. I highlighted that 1.7 million euros had been used for the repairs of Ukrainian cars. I asked where the money came from. And I was berated in the Dáil at that time and called a dog whistler. And I think I was called, shame, was shouted by the Taoiseach and some junior minister, I can't remember his name, at the same time. And you kind of look at these guys and you say, Jesus, lads, are you not living in the real world? Are your constituents not bringing their concerns to you? The problem is that they're in a bubble and they've been ignoring the situation for far too long, trying to be the best boys in Europe, trying to be the best in class, and created a huge monster. Like, Eddie, I'll be straight with you. A country that cannot look after 16,000 people in homeless accommodation, living on the streets, 6,000 of those children, was never a country that should have taken in 100,000 Ukrainian refugees and 50,000 or 35,000 plus of asylum seekers into this country. We need to get strict on our laws. The fact that I have first-hand information that somebody entered Dublin Airport and said, and I've stated this in the Dáil, when they were asked the question, how did you enter this country? They said, hot air balloon. Now, that doesn't sound like somebody that's fleeing from war. That sounds like a cheeky pup to me, straight out. Okay? And what I'm saying and what we've always been said, let's be fair and let's be to genuine people. We're people that are running from crises. Let's process it quickly. Let's move them along. If somebody enters the country without your passport, if somebody enters the country with no valid information, you can't trace who they are, what they are, where they're coming from. And you have to ask the question as well, if I was an asylum seeker coming from Afghanistan or whatever, I landed in Greece, why wouldn't I say I'm claiming asylum here? Why do you have to cross the entire continent of Europe to get to Ireland? There's a reason for that.
Can I just pick you up on two things there that you said that I think that are very interesting? Firstly, it seems to me anyway, because we've been following Counterpoint, we've been focusing on the Danish model for quite a while. It seems to me that the British are now almost, they're mimicking an awful lot of copy and paste of Denmark, and Ireland is suddenly saying, "Oh, we could have a big problem here." Of course, the recent presidential election is another flare going up for them. But is this, you just said something I think that I find interesting. You said that, we weren't ready to do this because of all of the deficits in housing, deficits, especially all the homelessness on the streets and so on. And what is the essential problem here? Is it a congenitive problem that we just can't join the dots in planning, or is corruption the biggest problem we have in Ireland?
It's very interesting. You should say corruption be the biggest problem we have. Corruption is everywhere, and we've learned to live with it and accept it, and we don't even see half of the corruption that's going on because it's become the norm. We're bringing a motion actually to the Dáil on whistleblowing and how whistleblowers are treated this week, and since I mentioned whistleblowers in the Dáil, I don't want to make it a whistleblower because I know we're in a different conversation, but since I mentioned whistleblowers in the Dáil 6 or 7 months ago, I've met with 50 or 60 of those. And going from the public servants, civil servants, prison services, Gardaí, people involved in banking inquiries, solicitors, from across the way, there's one thing that actually comes across all the time. It's the exact treatment and the handbook, the unwritten handbook of how to deal with whistleblowers and how to deal with people that are calling out corruption. And it's destroy them, it's disgrace them, it's deny and embarrass and ruin their financial lives, ruin their personal lives, and that shows systemic corruption in the state, 100%.
Yeah, because they're threatening the pot of money, right? That's correct. That's essentially what you're saying.
And the state agencies have pots of money. If you're the whistleblower and you're out of a job or you're suspended because you've blown the whistle on something, you don't have entitlements to free legal aid. So you're screwed because you have a government agency using all their resources to screw you, to cover up. And we've seen it in CHI, we've seen it we've seen John Lee today, I think maybe yesterday, talking about Garda holsters. We've seen it in the Irish prison services where the two Johnnies get 45,000 and hundreds of thousands of euros have been discrepancy and have been recorded, and it's been in the Public Accounts Committee and the PAC. You see all these scandals are breaking all the time. And what do we get? We get the same thing over and over again. It's the wringing of the hands and either a Taoiseach or a Taoiseach saying lessons must be learned. Well, lessons are never learned.
Well, I agree with that. Well, we've had we've done a focus as well on the protected disclosure laws from 2022. There was an EU amendment, and we've had it looked at, and it's quite clear from the legal advice is that it's designed not to work. It's designed basically not to allow the substantive issue to break through by design, and I find that very, very interesting. It's time to pivot to solutions. We know the problems and the challenges. This coming January the 10th and 11th, I'm hosting the first ever IRL Forum, a solutions-driven national public conference with special guests speaking on issues Ireland faces today. Hence, this is the beginning of a comprehensive new discussion about what to do. Visit irlforum.com now for limited tickets with 20% off for early birds using my promo code EDDIE. See you there. When we get back to this huge problem that we've had, which is not just with illegal immigration, but just the response to it, because we do know that there's an enormous amount of money being made in the background by very unusual companies from very unusual locations involving billions of taxpayers' money, and there doesn't seem to be much control on it. And, there's a sense, I know it's a long time ago now, but, I lived through it as a young man. That whole tent in Galway, that whole feel seems to be around the whole IPAS business again.
Well, look, I can't confirm or deny whether that's actually happening or not, or whether people are on the take or whatever. What I can confirm to you is that 1.1 billion has been spent on IPAS centres and on hotel accommodation. What infuriates people that I'm talking to, my constituents, and what drives them absolutely insane and upsets them is that you look at young men standing outside the Simon community at 7 o'clock in the evening to get in at 11 o'clock at night. They're lucky if they get a mattress on the ground because it's so overcrowded. And then you go down the road where there's an IPAS centre and a brand new hotel that has been taken over as an IPAS centre, and you see people coming in, never contributed to the state, parents never contributed to the state, they're handed toiletries, they're given 3 meals a day, they're given medical cards. And I have people coming into my office saying, I'm 5 years over on my private pension that I paid into all my life, contributed to the state all my life, and now my medical card has been revoked. And that's what drives people insane and annoyed over it. Sorry, Eddie, I'm probably wandering off with these things. But look, there is a situation where people are making extreme, vast amount of money involved in this. And of course, there's people that want this to go on forever. I was admonished and told to sit down inside Leinster House when I brought up the specific question as how is somebody with an address living in an IPAS centre in Mallow with 2 different addresses, how does he go from entering the country to owning an IPAS centre himself or being the front man for an IPAS centre himself? How does that assets of those companies that he is the managing director of and 80% owner of, how does that man manage to live in an IPAS centre and own a property worth over €1 million in West Cork? That is bizarre to me, and nobody wants to talk about it. Nobody wants to investigate it. So does it make you suspicious? Absolutely.
Well, it makes you feel that that
we've been taken for mugs.
Yeah, well, exactly. There's an awful lot of corruption everywhere in Ireland, I think, but it's very subtle. Very subtle. That's my own view. It's not a question I'm going to throw at you. But when you look at the when you look at the strain on the infrastructure of the state, I mean the services, the health service, we know them all, education, schools, etc. It goes on almost forever. And yes, we've had a big population boom. A lot of it, our population is changing rapidly for the same reason. I mean, how would you put when you allow for normal legal immigration and then what I call the illegal immigration, the fake asylum seekers and refugees? How would you put a stop to the overall number? I mean, would you cap it with how would you change the overall system? What do you see there?
Well, look, I suppose. First of all, we would just say that you can't keep on going the way we're going. We're actually at a population level that we didn't expect to be at until 2035. So now in 2025, we're beyond capacity. You've mentioned yourself, infrastructure-wise, schools. One of the biggest concerns that comes into the office to me when I hear of people around the country saying there's an IPAS centre opening up, we're worried. We're worried about protection, security. We're worried about how many school places will be there, the strain that's already on the school. Schools have already come to the minister and said we can't afford to turn on the heating or turn on the lights. I think there was a school recently asked people to bring in their own toilet roll. That's how the pin to the collar is of education in this country. So when people are concerned about what's going to happen in their town and can their town infrastructure take it, and that means the dentist, the doctor's office, the whole lot. So look. The question that you asked is what's the answer to it? The answer is the Danish model. The answer is being very, very tough. The answer is making it unattractive for the migrant, for the economic migrant to enter the country. And look, Eddie, there's nobody outside. I represent a city where we have Apple computers, the home of the European headquarters for Apple. 95 languages have been spoken there. We both now come from a very cosmopolitan city, and I'm very proud of that fact. And they're working and they're contributing to society and they're adding something new to society, and that's fantastic. And they've integrated, and they're interested in contributing. Like, nobody is outside Apple computers saying foreigners go home. Nobody is outside the CUH hospital saying foreigners go home. So when I hear this bloody argument from the left of if we didn't have migration and we didn't have immigration and we didn't have this and we didn't have that, we'd have no doctors and nurses. Nobody is complaining about that. Nobody in right-minded in society is worried or gives a damn about someone who's coming here to input into society, pay their way and integrate in society. What they are worried about is hundreds of men getting off buses in the middle of the night in small little towns across Ireland. That's what they're worried about.
Well, do you know what? That's a good time to maybe go, and we're just going to play this clip. This is the visit of the EU Commissioner. What's his name? Magnus Brunner. He's an Austrian ex-minister for finance, and he's responsible for EU migration and internal affairs. So let's have a look at what he had to say.
Today is that it's working very effectively, well prepared. As I said, the whole system, as we saw, and the way it is organized was just very professional and very human as well. So it's a very good mixture, I would say, and I think as I said, it's a very good example for the rest of Europe.
Can you see why people go nuts when they hear something like that? I mean, here's a man. He clearly didn't know. He was driven through the gates of City West, right next to the location where that 10-year-old child was allegedly assaulted, and all that has to work its way out through the courts. And here he is. He's been fronted by RT saying, this is a great example of how these centres should operate. So, and on the one hand, Jim O'Callaghan is saying we're going to do something about this because if we don't, we're going to get flooded from Britain, so we have to follow Britain. And for Jews, that's what he's doing, but we'll see how much that comes into concrete.
How far he'll go.
Yeah, how far he'll go. And then on the other hand, because you've just mentioned it, up until the presidential election, people like the community in City West and all over Ireland have been targeted consistently by their own government with tropes about being far right and being racist and so on. And we're going to consult with you when clearly they're not consulting with them. And it's no wonder that a massive gap has opened up between this uniparty and the people.
Well, first of all, can I just say, when I saw that clip yesterday and I read the headline yesterday, first of all, I was kind of in a bit of a shock of, did this man realise what had happened at City West, or allegedly happened? And secondly, I was very annoyed by it. I was just very annoyed by the entire clip, and this whitewashing of the Irish government. Again, give us the pat on the back. It's a bit like the dog looking for a biscuit, this pat on the back. We'll show him all the nice things and we'll show how marvellous Ireland is now, and we give him the Dillio dose and all this sort of carry on. That's what was done by the government yesterday on that, right? And look, let me get back to City West. Communities up and down this country have been ignored. They haven't been consulted. They haven't had the courtesy of even telling them that this was going in. It was all done in the dead of night on most occasions, and I see those footages. People are sending me the things that have been shot with their cameras, people arriving late at night and into centres, no consultation whatsoever. And then, of course, they're being told, well, you're a racist if you say anything. You're a horrible individual. You're a Nazi. You're this. You're the other. We'll throw every name that is awful about you, and we'll quieten you that way, because nobody likes to be called something like racist or Nazi or whatever. But the reality is that they're obviously using the phrases, we have to train people, not people to integrate, but we have to train the village about what's acceptable now, and what's good neighbours, and and I hear these phrases that they say nobody has. I can't remember the exact words, but nobody has a veto on who lives next door to you. Actually, you do.
Yeah,
you do have a veto, because you can, in particular in this country, a fella in Waterford can object to a Velux window for a fella's house in Donegal. Yeah. But all of a sudden you don't have a veto in your own community of what's going on in your community. You have to consult with people. You have to provide, if you are bringing an influx of people into a small village or a small town, you have to look at what's going to be happening to the medical resources in the town, what's going to happen to the educational, the dental resources in the town, what's going to happen culturally to the town. When you close the hotel where we have our weddings, communions, confirmations and baptisms, and that we go to every Sunday with Granny for the spot of lunch or whatever, that people meet together for the cup of coffee and the chat, that has a detrimental effect on the community. But to hell with that. To hell with that. You're a racist if you say that.
Yeah, can I just move us on a small bit from where we are now to where we will be in the very near future? On the basis that the sort of the uniparty is beginning to wake up to the political reality that it's very exposed. I mean, that would be my assessment, from this. But just to get to the political strategy of independent Ireland, just want to get a sense of it, because the party recently supported the confidence motion in Simon Harris, which would have struck a lot of people who support independent Ireland as rather odd, to put it mildly.
Yeah, I wasn't expecting that question, Eddie. Thanks very much. Jeez, there's no help for any Cork man down here. Look, I'll be straight with you, right? Yeah. Simon Harris went out that morning and, those good few years ago now and said, this is what's after be happening. We'll have the surgeries within 4 months. It was found wrong. Having said that, there was a public official that went out 7 or 8 times that morning and said, this is what's happening, that's what's happening. The day before, we were in the AV room as a group. We were invited in by Harvey's parents and it was hosted by a senator. They had a conversation with the entire Oireachtas that turned up to that meeting. At no time did they ask us to support the no confidence motion. I did say in the dial at the time, I thought it was badly timed. I think today, if we had, once the statutory inquiry is set up, once we were able to hold people accountable, people that wouldn't be held accountable, because to my mind, what would have happened is you would have maybe got your head, you wouldn't really got your head whether we voted for him or not, okay? But if they got the head of Simon Harris, inquiries are killed off and it's forgotten about. I think the parents of Harvey and so many others and those children that have suffered with incorrect surgeries and some of them that have been maimed for life with incorrect screws and the whole lot, I think they deserve better. I think they deserve a full inquiry. Do I regret?
No, I'm not asking do you regret it at all. I'm just saying that.
No, we got the backlash.
I'd say,
we set out our position. People rang me and said, in the name of God, what are you doing, Ken? The other lads can speak for themselves. But it was a tough couple of weeks, and it's difficult for people to get their head around it. We intended as Independent Ireland not to be in opposition for the sake of being opposition. We went into government negotiations with them, if you recall, 12 months ago, to sit down and talk to them and say, look, we have these ideas and let's sit down and talk. Instead, he did his deal with Mr. Lowry. Doesn't surprise me, by the way. Do I have confidence in this entire government? Absolutely not. Would I vote confidence if there was a confidence motion in the government? Absolutely not.
Yeah, I didn't ask you those questions,
okay.
But thanks for asking them.
Sorry.
No, that's all right. But I was going to say to you that, if we move on to the general election, people who are very interested in independent Ireland and what it's about, will be asking themselves, when the push comes to the shove, is it the political reality that you're going to end up acting almost like a mudguard on the uniparty and shoring them up? Negotiating, trying to get a few things done, maybe a junior ministry or whatever, or is there a bigger plan?
Well, Is
there a bigger plan?
Yeah. I'll give you, for instance, when we were in negotiations for government and we said, okay, lads, it got to the kind of end of the conversation and said, so what do you want?
Yeah.
And we said, we want veto on government policy.
Yeah.
There was no list of I want a car for Cork and a car for Limerick and 2 cars for Cork and 1 car for Roscommon. Yeah. There was no conversation about that. There was no interest. There was no interest on our side for that. It was a veto and it was being a watchdog. Look, I'll be straight with you, and I think Mary Harney put it right, in the sense of the worst day in government equals the best day in opposition.
Yeah.
And you can't make changes without being part of a government. The ambition for independent
Ireland... But not
Ireland,
at any price, sure.
No, absolutely not. The ambition for independent Ireland at this stage, bearing in mind we're 12 months old, we're going to make mistakes. Of course we are. We're not going to be as professional as the larger parties because we're not around long enough. We don't have the staff, we don't have the resources that other parties have. We have some very, very keen, good people involved. We have some outstanding councillors. And some like Noel Thomas will be contesting the Galway election for us, and we have a couple of people that are interested in the Dublin by-election whenever that's called. But I will say to you is that, watch this space. It's our ambition to double, triple our number of councillors. It's our ambition to elect people to the Senate. It's our ambition to have full representation across the country at the European Parliament level. I think we've got a really good guy with Kieran Malooly.
Yeah.
Very, very competent and clever and interest in his job. You know, I don't think I've ever seen an MEP as connected with the people of Ireland as Kieran is. And I would say to you, watch this space, because it's common sense is what we're talking about. Common sense for the common good is what we're about.
You've a few years, right? I just had a look. I went onto your website and I was looking down through and pages of notes on your policies and all the rest of it. And but one of the things that struck me was when I looked at just the team as it is at the moment. I mean, you would be a whippersnapper in comparison to many that are there, and you've one female. No, she's fun. By the way, I think she's really, really good.
She is.
Linda de Courcy. Yeah. And I hope to have her in studio at some stage, because I think she's very interesting. But you know, I've been there before, you see, so I know it's very, very, very difficult what you're attempting to do. Much more difficult than people understand looking in from the outside because of the restrictions and so on.
Well, first of all, I'm 46, but thanks for calling me a whippersnapper.
Yeah.
Thank God somebody thinks I'm a whippersnapper.
It was relative. It was relative to the lineup. You know?
I went to a door recently and a child came out and she runs into her mum and she says, "Mom, Santa Claus is at the house." So, you know, look, you know, of course.
But you're making a point.
That's the problem that every political party has. Okay? But I will say we have some very, very clever, good people. You know, I don't take. We have some. Daniel Sexton is a very young councillor. He's in his 20s. You have.
So you're confident of change.
You have Hartigan in Limerick. That's in his maybe 20s, 30s that way. I'm very bad at putting ages on people now, so you know I'll probably get a text after this. So you have some very, very good people. I mean, some very good people that we're appointing slowly but surely as community representatives. So people where we don't have representations, that we will have a community rep on the ground and will be an independent Ireland
But
rep.
Ken, do you think that the SIPO rules? The rules.
It's very difficult to start a political party.
Yeah.
You know better than I do, probably.
I would call it almost impossible.
Next to impossible. And what we've achieved.
Do you think they're too restrictive?
100%. 100%. And
how would you change them?
It's very difficult. Well, you'd go back to the rules. Look at the rules.
You could update it by the rate of inflation in the meantime.
100%. But also, you would look at the rules that are across in the UK. Much easier to set up a political party. We've seen that with Reform, how they've been able to move along and get their political funding and the rest of it. And there's constraints, of course, as well about private funding, where you can accept that private funding from. You know, funding hasn't been a problem for us. We've self-funded. That's being honest with you. We've all put our hands into our back pocket and said, right, I can do this, you can do that, and you can do the other, and that's what we've been doing. But look, we are trying the impossible, and we might fall flat on our face. But the one good thing is that we are 4 TDs that have very, very different interests in life, that come from different backgrounds, different community backgrounds, and different ways of life, and we've found a common ground. You know, I'm not going to tell you there's times when it's not easy, and you say, Jesus Almighty, what way do you think in Roscommon, or what way do you think in Limerick? And they say, what way do you think in Cork? It's never easy. It's never easy, but is it worth doing? Absolutely.
Yeah, well.
To my mind, it's worth doing.
I think the project is very interesting. That's why we're having the discussion, Ken, and I wish you well with it. I just wanted to ask you one last question, just specifically on the main topic in this episode, which is this at least change in rhetoric from the government around what needs to be done. How do you intend to hold them to account now for following up with actual action on the ground?
Well, first of all, I'd like if they recognised, you know, that a year ago we were talking about this. I describe what Roger O'Gorman did is, you know, the equivalent of going on Facebook and inviting people to a house party and saying everyone's invited and 1,000 people turn up, and then you're kind of cried at the corner saying, what have I done? You know, I think that's probably a lot of people would have seen me first time, despite the fact that I was a councillor for 16 years. Look, you know, I'm not going to admonish the government, and I'm not going to, you know, berate the government for the sake of being opposition. If they're doing something right and they're moving the right direction, and they're moving our direction, you know, things that I was called a racist about 12 months ago, and that I was called this, that, and the other, and didn't know what I was talking about, is now coming to fruition. Although the hand has been pushed by the United Kingdom, it's not voluntary. So the big change of policy and the big change of ideas isn't coming from Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael. It's because it's being a forced hand. Yet again.
So I take it from that you're going to be you'll be a bit like a sniffer dog in a smuggler's yacht when it comes to this issue over the next few months. We can expect.
Well,
more
look, you know, there'll be questions to be asked. There's always questions to be asked. You know, I was recently told by the Irish Times that I put the most parliamentary questions down in this first year of the Dáil.
Yeah. Why were they asking you that question? Sure.
Well, was it interesting?
Why were they ringing here to congratulate you?
Well, I don't think the Irish Times would ever have a headline congratulating me. No, the journalists wanted to know, was I wasting the time of the public servants and the civil servants by asking these amount of questions? Because it was extra work for them. Now, I did repeat to them, and I don't know where it'll be printed or how it'll be printed by them, but busy is your job. My job is to hold this government to account. My job is to ask the difficult questions, the hard questions, sometimes the questions that people don't want to hear the answers to. But that's my job. Yeah, I'd be letting down the people of Cork, and I'd be letting down the people of Ireland if I didn't do those.
Yeah, but look, I don't know who the journalist is, but I mean that's.
I'd like to know who the civil servant is who's complaining about me. I have an idea. I have an idea.
That's not journalism. That's propaganda. That's propaganda. So listen, we're going to leave it at that with Ken. Ken, thank you so much for coming into studio. I look forward to having you back again.
Well, now I know where you are. You won't get rid of me.
Exactly. Right. And so you know what to do. If you like this episode, please hit the like and subscribe button. And if you think this content is important enough to circulate, especially to keep a very close eye on the action following the words, the rhetoric from the Minister for Justice, please send this episode around to your network so that we can continue this conversation. While the episodes aren't in air, the conversation can continue on. Good night.